All right, let's jump into chapter 15. So right here off the bat here in chapter 15, we get some of these like hard lessons, right? I mentioned that in the prayer. Some of the things that Jesus taught, some of those are pretty hard and convicting. I think that right here at the beginning, this first section is an example of that. He says in chapter 15 and verse 1 that the Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem and said, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat." And of course, we already are predisposed to disliking the Pharisees with good reason. But I think that we need to take that question, whether or not they mean it insipidly or not. I think we need to take it as a reasonable question. Because the fact is, there were purity laws under the old law, and the elders had created these traditions around the purity laws to protect the people. Now, maybe they'd strayed away from that, and as we're going to see, there's a heart problem here. But it's a reasonable question. These things are here to protect us, right? They are part of what we do as being Jews. They're part of what identify us. It is an extension of the very laws of God that we need to follow. So why don't you follow them, Jesus? Why don't your disciples follow these things? Because they clearly matter and are important. That's the question. Now, maybe they just don't like him, and so they're picking at him. But I think it's a reasonable enough question for us to consider. Look at Jesus' response. He says, "And why do you break the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition? For God commanded, honor your father and your mother, and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die. But you say, if anyone tells his father or mother, what you would have gained from me is given to God, he need not honor his father. So for the sake of your tradition, you have made void the word of God. You hypocrites, well did Isaiah prophesy of you when he said, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men." And so even if we want to give them the benefit of the doubt for the question, right? What does Jesus come back with? What's the problem? Yeah. You may have these purity laws and these traditions that you're following, but why don't we go back to the 10 Commandments, say, and consider the actual commandments that God gave from the beginning? What about those? Do those traditions matter? Then he quotes Isaiah, says this is the same problem that you all have always had, right? You honor me with your lips, but your heart is far from me. In vain do you worship me, teaching his doctrines, the commandments of men. You've missed the point completely. Even if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt here with these purity laws and the washing of the hands, he says, you've created this loophole for yourselves, right? Honor your father and mother, and yet you're saying, well, if we just give that money to the temple or to God, now we don't have to take care of our parents because we've actually given that to God. Which, of course, who does that benefit if the money goes into the temple? The people that are receiving the money out of the temple, right? So, at best, they've misunderstood the law, right? And their heart isn't always in it the way it should be. At worst, they're deliberately manipulating people for their own benefit. And I think as we're going to see as Jesus goes on, it's probably the worst case scenario here. And so you have this problem here with the Pharisees. And why this? Why were they so eager to attack Jesus here? Like, what's the problem? What's the impetus for this? Because we're probably skeptical of their sincerity in the question. But why? Like, what is their goal in this? And maybe they are sincere, but I want the case for why. Yeah. Right. And I was trying to think of a good example of this, like a good example of traditions coming from a good place, but then losing their point, and I couldn't really come up with one. It was hard for me to try and strike that balance perfectly and illustrate it perfectly. But I was trying to think in terms of Thanksgiving or something, right? Like you have a Thanksgiving meal and you have some tradition around Thanksgiving, like we all go around and say thank you, or we have this thing that we're going to eat and it's going to be this great thing because it's a sign of whatever. But then it becomes such a burden to make the turkey every year as a sign of what's going on that you're no longer thankful because you're too busy trying to figure out how to make the turkey. whatever it is, right? Like I said, I couldn't come up with a good example. But I think you get the idea or the premise, right? That now this thing that was supposed to help aid what you're doing has superseded everything else. And it's taken the place of what's supposed to happen, which is to show gratitude. But now it's much more about we have to have the turkey cooked this way, this exact right way. And if anybody wants the turkey cooked a different way, then, well, they just shouldn't come, right? Because we're going to cook it this way because this is the way my mother cooked it, my grandmother cooked it. And if you don't like turkey this way, then you shouldn't have come at all, right? Like that kind of problem, right? As opposed to like, oh, yeah, pilgrims and Thanksgiving and whatever. Now it's a burden and you're just disrupting the whole process. And I think that's the issue here that's at stake, right? That they're coming and they're saying, look, you're not doing things the way you're supposed to. You're supposed to have turkey at Thanksgiving. Like that's what you're supposed to do. Why aren't you doing that? Like we're skeptical of you, Jesus, because here you are coming and pretending to be a teacher, but you're not even eating the turkey. You're not even washing your hands before the meal. You can't even do the smallest part of the purity laws. And you're going to come here and act like you have some great understanding of the law and teach all these people? We are distrustful of you. Why can't you follow these commandments? And what does Jesus say? You're upset because I'm not washing my hands? You violated the 10 commandments. Like the basic, like most basic fundamental part of the law. The 10 commandments, right? Not the 11th or the 12th, not some passage in Deuteronomy about putting parapets up on the roof of your house. No, the 10 commandments. You're not even honoring your father and mother. And you're worried about washing hands. You've completely missed the point here. And so then, because I think that's pretty harsh both ways, right? Like they're trying to get at Jesus and he, of course, as he always does, supersedes their argument with one that's even more fundamental to their misunderstanding. So verse 10, he called the people to him and said to him, hear and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth. This defiles a person. And the disciples come to him and say, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying? So one, what is Jesus saying? He turns to the people and he says this, but then why would this offend the Pharisees? Right, it's an attack on them. Is what Jesus saying controversial? Like we take this for granted, right? Like we say this all the time. It's not what goes into the mouth will come out that defiles the man. But when Jesus says this, is this a controversial thing to say? Because what did they fundamentally believe about clean and unclean? Like if you were going to go up to a Jew and you say, what makes you clean and what makes you unclean? Or just tell me about, like I keep hearing these words, clean, unclean, tell me about it. What might they mention? They might mention the things that purify you, the purity laws. But what else might they mention immediately? Right. And part of that fundamentally are the animals, right? The clean and the unclean animals. You can't eat those because they make you unclean, and then you can't participate in the synagogue, you can't do worship, like these things defile you. And fundamentally, that's what you eat, right? Like you can't eat the things that chew the cud, right? You can't eat the things that crawl in the ocean. You can't eat the things that eat the dead things. Like there's all sorts of rules about what you can't eat. These animals are clean, these are unclean. And if you eat them, you're unclean because you've taken those into you. Like that's what the law says. And what does Jesus say? Yeah, exactly. That's what he's going to explain in a second. Like you've misunderstood. You've taken it literally that these things are unclean and you take them. There's a bigger point at stake here. It's actually what comes out of your mouth that shows you what's, and they probably thought he was talking about vomit or something, right? They're like, what are you talking about? Because we're talking about food and you're talking about like getting sick, like sicking up all over. Like what are you talking about, Jesus? And so they say this offended the Pharisees because, this is a violation of the law and this is a violation of the things that they believe. Don't you know that this was offensive to them? And he answered, every plant, verse 13, that my heavenly Father has not planted will be rooted up. Let them alone. They are blind guides, and if the blind lead the blind, both will fall into a pit. So his response is, yeah, they're offended. They have no idea what's going on. They're the blind guides. And if you follow them, they're going to lead you down into the pit, which Old Testament poetry kind of language, when you think of the pit, what do you think of? Sheol, right? You think of death. And that's the implication, right? Like these blind guides, they're going to lead you straight down to Sheol if you follow them. Straight down into death. And there, Peter's like, what are you talking about? Like, give us a little bit more explanation here. So he says in verse 16, are you also still without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and is expelled? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this defiles a person. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile anyone. So again, what's he saying? He's kind of superseding the argument, right? If you yell at somebody, right? Something happens and you clap back at them and you kind of yell at them angrily. Did that just happen? Did you just all of a sudden go from happy and dancing around, like having a great time, to turning and screaming at somebody? Is that the way that works? I mean, maybe if you have, some sort of mental problem, like, what is it, bipolar or something like that, right? But for most of us, most of the time, when you start yelling at somebody, where does that come from? You can feel the anger building within you and the frustration, right? And then you clap back at them. And it's like, that didn't just happen, right? Like, maybe you were feeling happy, but you've been stewing some anger towards that person for a while. We've got little kids, and I notice that feeling all the time. One of the kids is whining or complaining about something, and you think it's going to be okay, calm down, you try to breathe, but you can just feel the anger welling up within you, and you're determined that you're not going to yell at them, right? No, they're tired. But what eventually happens? If you're not careful, you're going to yell at the kid, right? Because the anger is still building, and as much as you pretend like you're trying to push it down, you're actually just making it worse, right? Because you're not addressing the problem, and you're allowing it to kind of well up within you. When Jesus is talking about these people and what they're doing and the problems, it's that their hearts are corrupted. And these evil things that are coming out of it's been welling up within them. And specifically, the example he gives about honoring father and mother at the beginning of the chapter, where does that come from? It comes from time of desiring the money that they're going to take from the temple, or the power that they're going to have, or the honor that they're receiving, or the desire they want of how people look at them, right? Those things are building up within them. And they placate themselves and pretend like it's all okay because they wash their hands. They're play acting, right? They're pretending, they're putting on this face of who they're pretending to be. And they've completely missed the point. So here's the question. Are we guilty of this? Do we have traditions? Do we have things that we can put in place of who we're actually supposed to be as Christians? Can we miss the boat just as badly as they did? I mean, certainly, right? Absolutely. And this is where you get in trouble, right? Trying to make applications within the church about these sorts of things. So we're going to pick one, and hopefully you all don't get mad at me. But I mean, just think, for instance, about something like modesty, right? Where there is no specific regulation on what the line is of modest or immodest, right? It is easy to say, this is the standard by which everybody must follow. And in the process of trying to articulate and protect people, right? Because let's say that it begins with an earnest heart to do what's right, and we're going to protect ourselves, and we're going to protect our daughters, and we're going to protect our sons, and we're going to enforce what we think is a good standard. Is it easy for that standard to now supersede other problems of the heart that we may have? That, in fact, we become immodest because of our modesty, that our modesty becomes just as showy and immodest as immodesty might have once been, right? Like certainly, right? And of course, this is a heart matter, and that's what Jesus is getting at. Like, where is your heart here? And so, yes, we create a standard, and we try to teach things, and we try to practice things in a way that is helpful and earnest and builds people up and all those sorts of things. But if we're not careful, we can fall into the same trap of missing the point about what modesty is actually about. And so that's just an example, right? And it's true of anything that we do or anything that we say. And it doesn't mean that the standard that we've established or the guardrail we put up or anything like that is wrong by any means. The danger is simply that guardrail becomes a tradition that then makes us think that we're better than we are. And our heart becomes corrupt, but we think that our heart is okay because we have this tradition that we followed in terms of that, right? And it stems from something that is good, which is modesty, something that we need to practice, that needs to matter, right? Megan and I have talked about this a lot. We've got little girls, and we try to figure out, okay, how do we teach modesty? And it is a fundamental thing that I think is part of who we are as Christians, right? That you are modest in all aspects of your life, but your clothing too, like that matters. But the danger is that now you've created your rule about that. And as long as you've kept that rule, you can have all sorts of corruption in your heart, but you feel okay because I'm still washing my hands, right? I may not be honoring my Father, but I'm washing my hands before I eat. And next thing you know, you've allowed this tradition to supersede what actually matters within the law, and you have a heart problem. But that's the danger. Because I don't know that I would say that the Pharisees were wrong for trying to imply or create these extra purity laws to protect their people, right? Let's be very careful. Like the effort to try and understand the Sabbath day and protect the Sabbath day, right? And make it holy, to protect people. Like we can see a world in which that's like an honorable thing, to be careful about that. But then we go to the New Testament and we see what it's turned into, right? And Jesus chastises and condemns them because they missed the point about the Sabbath day altogether. That's the danger that you fall into here, right? And that's what Jesus is warning his disciples about. Questions, comments? Everybody's really mad at me. Making sure everybody has a chance. So, I think this is important because, one, Jesus said it, obviously, right? But it's this heart matter stuff that's really difficult about what you believe and who you are. And Jesus gives us a little bit of a test, right? Like the fruit that you bear is an illustration of the heart that you have. And so, Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, all those things. Like those are things that come out of your heart, your very spirit, who you are, and you bear this kind of fruit. And so there's the test that Jesus gives, that the New Testament gives about how do you know your heart? Well, you know your heart based on the fruit that you bear. And so I think that that's the thing that comforts us on the other side. I've asked myself that question before. How do you know your own heart? Right? Like, how do you know that your motives are actually pure? Because it's so easy to get confused about what matters or whether or not you're doing things for the right reason. Because there may be ancillary benefits to that, right? I mean, I remember in school, it almost worked without fail in high school. Teacher misgrades a test and gives you credit for an answer that you actually got wrong. And if you go to the teacher and say, actually, I got this one wrong, almost inevitably the teacher would say, well, I appreciate your honesty, so I'm going to let you keep the grade, right? They said it all the time. Because, one, high school teachers make a lot of mistakes sometimes on grading things. There's a lot of tests to grade. That was before everything was digital. I don't know if they still give paper tests anymore, but I don't know. We had paper tests. You got to circle them all, right? So that's part of it. But then the other part of that was they were too lazy to probably change the grade. Some of that, they're like, I don't want to have to go back in the computer and change it all. And who cares? It's fine. Keep the grade. But you learn that, right? So then Now you get double credit because now the teacher's like, oh, look at this fine, young, upstanding young man who's honest enough to at his own hurt, to come, But then you also get to keep the score. So then it becomes this game. And it's like, so why are you turning it in? Is it because you want the credit for being the honest person? Or is it because you're actually honest? And so you have like, well, I don't know, because I can't separate the two because it works out this way every time. Right? So what are you doing now? Why are you doing these things? And so how do you know your own heart? You kind of wonder about that, right? And that's a small example, but it happens with big things. Like, how do I took this job that pays this amount of money, or I went to this place that gives me, and whatever it is, there's these ancillary benefits that you may receive. It's like, I'm going to work really hard because, do all things as if for the Lord. And so I'm going to work hard and do all these things. But then it's like, by the way, I'm going to get this promotion if I work really hard too. So are you doing it because it's for the Lord, or are you doing it because you want more money? So all these things are difficult, right? How do you know your own heart? Because those things are both true at the same time. Well, the test is, what kind of fruit are you bearing? Right? What are the things that are proceeding out of your heart? Hard work, that's a good thing. At what cost are you sacrificing for the hard work, right? What other sort of fruit are you bearing? What other sort of attitude do you have? That's the test that he's giving there. And the test for the Pharisees is, you have these traditions about purity, washing your hands, right? But you've missed the whole point, and I know that because you're not taking care of your widows and your elders. So the fruit that you're bearing is wrong. So you want to go back to the modesty example, right? And it's like, how do you know that your heart is pure about that? Well, what other fruit are you bearing, right? Are you justifying some attitude so that you could point your finger at other people and condemn them, and angry and insulting and insipid? Or are you bearing the fruit of the Spirit in what you're doing and saying? And so there's the test, right? Like, you can look at your life and the fruit that you bear, and that's the way that you see what's proceeding out of your heart, to help you understand whether or not your heart is pure or not. Like, that's what he's getting at, right? Look at the things that are coming out that you're bearing and what you're doing. So there's a test, right, to help us understand, to help us know our own heart, see the things that we're continually doing. Hopefully that's helpful. Because I think these questions get difficult about traditions and this and that and right and wrong and motives, and all that gets complicated, right? But there's the simple test. What is proceeding out of your heart? How do you talk to people? How do you treat people? How do you interact with them? How do you live? What kind of fruit do you bear? Any questions, comments? Thoughts on any of that? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's well said. What are you seeking? What are you striving after? And I think your response to criticism can show that. Doesn't mean that every criticism is correct, but you give it consideration. Are you thoughtful enough and introspective enough to see whether or not it applies to you? And that, it goes back to even what I was praying at the beginning of class, right? I knew what we were going to study in chapter 15. And the fact of the matter is, sometimes you read things or say things, like look at what Jesus said, and you're confronted with it. And how do you respond? What is your reaction to it? How thoughtful are you? Are you reevaluating things? And the Pharisees weren't willing to do that. As Jesus, and of course we know that Jesus is right because he's Jesus, confronts them, they ignore it and get angry, and they kill him for it eventually, right? Which is the exact opposite of the sort of heart that he's talking about having, which is being willing to change and understand and grow and all those things. So as we kind of jump into this next section, it's a little bit of a transition here. Verse 21, Jesus went away from there and withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and was crying, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon." So this is interesting. He's in Tyre and Sidon, which is kind of a Canaanite town up there on the coast. And Canaanite woman comes up to him and says, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David." So some understanding or recognition of who he is, confesses it, and it says, "My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon," right? Asking for healing. Verse 23, but he did not answer her a word. And his disciples came and begged him, saying, "Send her away, for she is crying out after us." What do you make of that? And we'll continue the story in a second. You can read on. I mean, it's surprising. He healed the centurion's daughter already in this book. He's healing everybody is the implication, but now he goes to a Canaanite city, and this Canaanite woman is begging for mercy, proclaiming who he is, and he just ignores her. So much so that she's chasing and screaming after him. And the disciples are like, "Can we get rid of her? Like, you're not doing anything. Can we just dismiss her? She's calling after us, Jesus. Do you not hear this?" And he answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." And you're like, yeah. And in a world that has been plagued with racism since the dawn of time, race issues are always at the forefront of everything politically, it seems like, especially the last 10 years. But go back to the 90s, it's always been there. Race has always been a problem in America. It's been a problem all over the world. People look different. They act different. You treat them different, right? And here's Jesus, who preaches the gospel that's not what he's preaching. He's saying, she's a Canaanite. I was sent to the house of Israel. And you're like, whoa, what? Oh, it's not what I expected. And she came and knelt before him saying, "Lord, help me." Like, it's getting more intense, right? Like, have mercy. Calling out, chasing after him, bows before him. "Help me. Help me." And he answered, "It is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." And you're like, look, what are you doing, Jesus? Like, this isn't the Jesus that we know, right? And she said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." I'm a dog, sure. Give me the crumbs. Give me anything. I just need help. And Jesus answered, "O woman, great is your faith. Be it done as you desire." And her daughter was healed instantly. What do you make of this? Yeah. Yeah. Maybe there's a change that takes place there. I do think you're right that she ultimately, the amount of humility and desperation she shows is unbelievable, right? She believed who Jesus was, believed that he was the answer to those problems, and was desperate to receive it. It's pretty incredible. Yeah.
Why was the guy born blind? Because God needed him at that day to show the power of God. It was for God's purpose. In John 11, whenever Lazarus died, Jesus says, "I'm glad I wasn't there." That way we can go show the glory of God. Here, she has to wait until it's fully manifested. What do we really do? And there's a reason behind it. She shows it, and demonstrates her faith, which the other ones need to see. The other disciples need to see that. They need to feel that Jesus' compassion, that ultimately he's going to have them.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I'll ask it this way too. Why did God wait till Abraham was over Isaac with the knife overhead? What does that do? I mean, like, he marched 3 days. Like, why not stop him at the mountain? Why not stop him halfway up the mountain? To who? And to Abraham, and to all of us, and to everybody. Right? God said, now I know. But we know, right? And Abraham knows, and Isaac knows, and everybody knows that Abraham believed to that extent. What do we learn from this woman? That she believed, yeah. What if every time you got a cut on your finger and you prayed to God, he healed it immediately? Every time you had a bill that was unexpected, you prayed to God and it magically was covered by somebody. Every time you got the slightest cough, you prayed and God healed your cough. What kind of faith would you have? And how would you view God? Doesn't that fundamentally change everything? If God becomes this, I don't know, like a ATM that you just withdraw whatever you need whenever you need it. Like that radically changes your relationship with him. But if you, on the other hand, are in dire need and you pray fervently every day for a month, for a year, for 5 years, and you never stop praying, what does that do for you in your relationship with God? What do you know then? You know that you believe that much, right? You know that you believe enough to endure that amount of suffering. And, you know, we wonder sometimes, maybe particularly when we're young, but at different times in our lives, we wonder, am I going to be saved? Like, do I believe enough? Am I good enough? Have I given God enough? Do I, like, you want assurance. And the best assurance we have is to know that we believe despite whatever we've gone through, right? And that's the amount of assurance we have. Like, do we have the assurance of Abraham? Well, no, because we don't have the faith of Abraham because we haven't been tested the way that Abraham has. I don't think that God has called any of you to take your son a 3 days journey, all those things, right? And until you've done that, you don't believe the way that Abraham believes. But Abraham doesn't believe the way that you believe either. Because Abraham hasn't endured the things that you've gone through. And so the things that you have endured and suffered, and like, that's the amount of faith that you have. That despite those things, you still believe, that you're still at church, that you're still praying, that you're still reading your Bible. This is a lesson like that, right? Like, here's this woman who is a Canaanite, and she comes and she begs Jesus to be healed, and he doesn't heal her, he ignores her. He treats her like a dog. He calls her a dog, literally. And she says, that's fine. I just need you to heal my daughter. Like, that's a different level of perspective that she has, that she believes in him despite not just not getting an answer, but a pretty unfavorable one. And we pray for things and we want things from God, and he doesn't always give us what we want, but you still believe. If you prayed to God and he says, no, I'm not going to give the scraps to the dog that belong to the children, you still believe in him. I mean, that's part of the lesson here, right? Is like having this perspective, because sometimes life doesn't work out the way you want it to. In fact, I don't think it ever does, right? Yeah, Ian. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting contrast. Yeah, Jeff. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pretty powerful lesson there, not only for them, but for us. Because it's easy for us to say, oh, those aren't the sort of people that we're looking for. And Jesus' point is that's not the way that this works, you know. You want the people who have this kind of determined faith like she has, who are coming. Yeah, David.
Finished taking their breath. He just put them in their place. And Matthew positions this right after this narrative where she comes and you could, I guess, say this is a Jesus being based or something. But he basically is trying to suggest maybe he isn't a respecter of persons, but he might be somewhat a respecter of cultures or peoples as a whole. And he is trying to make it clear there's a difference between the people of Israel and the people in that people as a whole. Like, he just finished slamming the Pharisees, but that doesn't make these other cultures that have done far worse or whatever more worthy or something. And so he makes her go through this exercise. And again, I think it may be more importantly for the disciples and for us as a whole to understand that, yeah, I mean, he really is illustrating that difference between, you know, it's harsh. It's harsh, and it comes from the mouth of Jesus. So it should be taken into consideration that the whole idea is not going to take the children's bread and give it to the dogs. And that is exactly what he is describing. Her people as a whole, you know, at the very least.
Yeah, it's interesting. So a lot of people who write on this passage emphasize the Jews first and also the Greek, and this distinction between Israel and the Gentiles, and how this is one of those things where he is elevating the Jews and the place that they have and the promises that were made to Abraham and all those things. And yeah. And maybe that's part of this. Like I said, a lot of people argue that. I don't know that I agree personally, just because. Okay, so let me clarify. It's right that the gospel did go to the Jews first, that they had this place of primacy within the receiving of the kingdom. But from the beginning, Jesus is healing and teaching any who will listen as well. And in fact, Matthew has shown that. And all the Gospels show that those that would normally be outside are brought in. And I think that that's interesting and significant and important as well. And so maybe there's something to this about showing the difference between yes, the Jews still have this place of primacy compared to the Canaanites.
I think it's more, this doesn't mean, just because I have shown the corruption that exists here, that you guys are great over here to make it outside.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. We've got a couple minutes left. We got to blitz through the end of the chapter. So, verse 29, Jesus went on from there and walked beside the Sea of Galilee. And he went up on the mountain and sat down there. And great crowds came to him, bringing him with them the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others. And they put them at his feet, and he healed them, so that the crowd wondered. Then they saw the mute speaking, the crippled healthy, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they glorified the God of Israel. This is almost a direct fulfillment of Isaiah 35, 5, and 6. We would take the time to go read it on time. But basically, this is almost a direct fulfillment of that prophecy. Jesus is healing the people, and he's changing their fate. He's changing everything about what's going on, and he's fulfilling these prophecies from the beginning. This is what has been spoken of even back in the time of Isaiah that was going to come. And you can see it by the people that are healed. But I don't think it should be missed that he just healed them, right? He didn't heal one of each type to fulfill the prophecy. He just heals the crowds that come to him. And I think that that's a testament to who Jesus is, which I think plays back even to this section before. And despite the fact that this woman is a Canaanite and whatever distinctions might take place there, he healed that woman's daughter too. Those who come to Jesus begging for healing, receive it. And that's just the reality of who he was. And I think that's significant. And it says, and they glorified the God of Israel because of this. And then Jesus called the disciples and said, I have compassion on the crowd. We've had references where it says Jesus had compassion on them. Here he specifically says, I had compassion on the crowds because they've been with me for 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I am unwilling to send them away hungry lest they faint on the way. So a little bit of a test for the disciples maybe. And they say, where are we to get enough bread in such a desolate place to feed a crowd so great? She said, how many loaves do you have? And they said, 7 and a few small fish. And directing the crowd to sit down on the ground, he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds, and they all ate and were satisfied, and they took up 7 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. Those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And after sending away the crowds, he got into the boat and went to the region of Magadan. So we had the feeding of the 5,000, now we have the feeding of the 4,000. Why the duplication of these sorts of accounts? We already had the one which teaches us all the same sort of principles, so why bother Matthew writing this one here with the feeding of the 4,000? Yeah, some have argued that because he was just in the period of Tyre and Sidon, so this may still be Canaanite land, so he's feeding a bunch of Gentiles. Could be. Doesn't explicitly say that, so that's like a question that people ask, then maybe that's the point. But we don't know for sure. Yeah.
Where are we to get enough bread? That's the place to feed such a great crowd. Like, didn't you just see what happened? Like, I don't know how long it is then. It could have been years. So, did you see what just happened? We were able to feed as many people with fewer loaves.
Right.
Fish. Come on.
Yeah, and maybe they're just waiting. You know what I mean? They're like, they don't want to be presumptuous. Like, is he going to do it again? Can we ask him if he's going to do it again? I don't know that we should. Like, you got to see that wondering, you know. Or maybe they're just like question whether or not he has the power. I don't know specifically, but this is my stab at why. Because we're setting up a pattern of who God is, who Jesus is. Like, he didn't just do it once to prove a point. He did it when it was necessary because he had compassion on the people. And we've seen that. Matthew has emphasized this in the way that he's written this gospel. Jesus simply cares. And his motivation is, I'm not going to send them away hungry. All who come to him are filled, right? And he takes care of his own, and he heals them, and he feeds them. And it doesn't matter if there's food present or not, Jesus provides and takes care of them. And I think that's a powerful lesson and a powerful reminder here of who he is and what he did and what his ministry was like, because that's the God that we believe in. We believe in the God who fed the 5,000 and the 4,000 and healed the Canaanite woman's daughter and the centurion, on and on. We believe in the Jesus who looked at the world as sheep without a shepherd and had compassion on them and healed them and cured them. And by the way, went to the cross to die for us and was resurrected on the third day to redeem us. And all of this is part of his character, and all of that I think is hugely significant for us to learn from and glean as we think about the God that we serve. Yet, he hammered the Pharisees and points the finger at us too about what is your heart like. But those who come to him, all you who are weary and heavy laden, come and I will give you rest. And he shows it time and again. And I think that's pretty significant. Thank you all for your kind attention. Sorry to rush through the end of that, but I appreciate your comments and questions.